may be seated. I told you I would try to share a brief update from the meeting in Springfield. There really, it was an uneventful, which is good, meeting. Brother Mark was approved for salary, again, through the American Baptist Association. I will share, and I know that this is one of those things I could probably not share, and one of the big discussions that came about for the missions portion of the meeting and dealt with international missionaries on salary. There were 23 Philippine missionaries that requested raises, and Philippines is one of those places that it doesn't take a whole lot to live there. And really depending on where, I think the higher end cities, I think it's you probably average monthly salary for the way that we base and try to base salaries for missionaries in the Philippines is based on the salary of a school teacher in that area. And so in some cities, school teachers may make $600 a month. In other cities, they may make $200 a month. And so it just depends on where you're at. Up into the mountainous regions, it's much less, much more of poor areas. And so anyway, there were 23, and some of these missionaries requested various amounts of raises. There were some that requested 200, some 250, some 75, some 25. It was recommended from the Standing Missionary Committee, which reviews all of the requests in the pre-associational meeting, and it was recommended that we do a 5% raise across the board to try to keep everybody somewhat even and without making major discrepancies. And so that was voted on and passed. And so instead of getting just various amounts, every one of those missionaries got a 5% raise for their salary. So, and I think they were the only ones that were voted on in that sense, and there was a little bit of discussion. I think people that are very close and involved in Philippine missions were in favor. There were obviously some that were not, but some of the ones that I know of and trust and believe that they have a very good understanding of what goes on there and what's needed, and spends a lot of time in the Philippines. They were in favor of that, and so I voted too in favor of that decision. But there were no other raises recommended across the board for any other missionaries. Also starting, I believe, next year, that foreign missionaries on salary will begin receiving a decrease in their salary every 5 years. We already do that for interstate missionaries on salaries, such as Brother Mark. Brother Mark has reduced from 100% to I think he's at 95%. He may be at more than that now. I don't remember. Anyway, the purpose for that is to try to help allow either their sending church or the mission itself to take up some responsibility. And so that is. I didn't realize that the international or foreign missionaries on salary did not already have to do that, but that is something that will start next year for them, and so it's a big deal because there's a lot that have been, I say a lot, there's some that I know that have been on salary for a long time, and they make just as much as our missionaries here because the cost of living where they are is just as high as it is here. But they're going to have to supplement somewhere along the lines. And so they could either come off salary and go on designated funds and get whatever they get given to them, or they'll just have to have supplement either through their sending church or the church that they pastor. That really was it as far as missions is concerned. There were some changes to the mission policy. One of those changes, I should have brought the paper. I have it back there on my desk, I think. But it is a change that I feel like goes along with much more what we believe doctrinally. But it allows there's always been a discrepancy between starting a mission and starting a church. And I don't ever see in the Bible, I know that Paul went on missionary trips and journeys, but everywhere he went, he started and established churches. And that's what we're starting in Perry, right? That's what Brother Mark is starting in Perry, as a church. And the policy allows the missionary, much like we see the Apostle Paul, as he went to different locations and established these churches, he was able to take the Lord's Supper with them. And that is not universal church. That is not open communion. And so, anyway, if you want to see that change in that policy, I have it, I'm pretty sure, back there on my desk. I'd be glad to get it and let you see it. I feel like, again, that it aligns with us doctrinally and makes sense. Outside of the missions and those areas, there was nothing else. Brother Mark did receive, it's probably already been shared and announced, and if so, that's fine. But Brother Mark did receive the nomination. Well, he was nominated and chosen to be the, what do they call it? The mission, focus, emphasis, whatever, for the ladies, National Ladies Auxiliary. Anyway, he was chosen to be their goal, mission goal for next year. And I believe this year the missionary that was the goal for this year, I think they received somewhere around $3,000 from National Ladies Auxiliary. And so we look forward to being thankful that Brother Mark was chosen for that. That being said, there was a group of ladies that went out and helped make that happen. And next year we're going to need some folks to go and represent as we receive that. And so if anybody wants to go to Hot Springs, Arkansas next year, go ahead and mark your calendar. Just look at the Father's Day, and then the week after that will be the national meeting. So whatever those dates are, put it on your calendar. We'll go. And so anyway, and if you don't want to go for just that, there's other things you can go and be a part of and do. The services at night are always good. The business meetings and all that, hey, take it or leave it. But the services are always good. So anyway, so other big news, or if you want to call it big news, the editor-in-chief for Bogard Press, this is the company we get our Sunday school literature from. The editor-in-chief, Brother Mark Clements, had made it known that he was going to be stepping down from that role. He served in that role for 4 years, and anyway, has done a great job, tremendous job. I had a conversation with him, told him I hated when I heard that he was stepping down, because he has done a wonderful job. Again, they're in charge of writing our VBS material. They're in charge of writing all our Sunday school literature, and as well as other Bible studies and things. But anyway, so he obviously resigned, and so it was voted on and approved on Thursday to replace him with Brother Nathan Llewellyn, who is currently was pastoring in Louisiana. And so I'm confident in Brother Nathan and the work that he will do in Texarkana for that. I was impressed this year. When Brother Mark Clements gave his report, They are already, I think in the next month or so, they're going to have all the VBS literature ready for next year, for 2026. I mean, that's printed and ready. And so they'll be able to send out the, and I told Miss Pam to order ours early. We'll see if it makes any difference for us, but the starter kit for Vacation Bible School will be ready, I think August or September of this year for next year. And then they also have this, they have 2027 literature is already written for VBS and ready to go to the printer. So excited, thankful for the work again that's done there. Financially, everybody was good. Nobody was hurting as far as the associated work is concerned. That covers missions, that covers Bogart Press and the actual work that goes on there. So anyway, it wasn't really like I said, it was fairly uneventful meeting, which is always a good thing. And so if you have any questions about anything, I'd be glad to share with you. There just wasn't a whole lot of things outside of just getting reports and reading and listening to those that was shared. Next year is the 100th session for the American Baptist Association, which is why we will be going to the Mecca in Arkansas. And so if you don't know anything about the ABA, if you ever were to look at red dots on a map of ABA churches, you'd find quite a few down in Florida, and then they'd sprinkle up a little bit into Georgia, not very many. But you get over to Arkansas and Texas, and it's flooded over there. So there's some of us tease about that being the Mecca of the ABA. So, but good meeting, good preaching, and so looking forward to what God has in store next year. I did have to serve on the memorials committee, and uncertain as to whether or not I will be put back on the memorials committee, but I have done that 2 years, and if they remove me, I won't be mad at them. But it is an honor, though. I mean, it's probably one of the few committees that I feel like actually has a commendable responsibility. Some of the other stuff is just, it is what it is. It's just busy reports and time-taking slots, but for us to be able to honor, and we put together a report that we all write collectively, and then there's also a video that's put together every year displaying the pastors, ministers, missionaries, preachers that have passed on in that past year throughout our work. And so anyway, so it's certainly something that has some honor and responsibility that goes with it. But anyway, so that's about it. I left Thursday and came home. So Nehemiah chapter 2. Anybody have any questions as you're turning there about the meeting? No? I answered all of it you wanted to know, didn't I? Some of that y'all were just itching to find out. Nehemiah chapter 2. We'll begin in verse 11. We, in chapter 1 and first part of chapter 2, we've seen Nehemiah's burden for Jerusalem. Again, a place that he had never even been. We've seen how the king's response to that burden and how God has provided everything that Nehemiah was going to need. And we even saw that whenever he arrived, that there was already a little bit of opposition there. And so as we move into verse number 11, we'll read down through verse 16 to begin with. So I came to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. And I arose in the night, I and some few men with me. Neither told I any what my God hath put in my heart to do at Jerusalem. Neither was there any beast with me, save the beast that I rode upon. And I went out by night, by the gate of the valley, even before the dragon well, and to the dung port, and viewed the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down, and the gates thereof were consumed with fire. Then I went on to the gate of the fountain, and to the king's pool, but there was no place for the beast that was under me to pass. Then I went up in the night by the brook, and viewed the wall, and turned back, and entered by the gate of the valley, and so returned. And the rulers knew not whither I went or what I did. Neither had I as yet told it to the Jews, nor to the priests, nor to the nobles, nor to the rulers, nor to the rest that did the work. So Nehemiah comes to Jerusalem. He's there after he's been there 3 days. Whether he was maybe recouping a little bit from that long journey. Anyway, he still has not told anybody why he is there and what God has put on his heart to do. And, now you have to understand, don't forget that the king sent Nehemiah with an escort. He sent him with an escort, so he has a military escort, and he's bringing in lumber from the king of Persia's forest. And, you would think that obviously people are going to notice him, right? People are going to see him coming in, and, but Nehemiah didn't say anything about his mission until the time was right. And, timing is important, isn't it? A good leader understands the importance of timing and making sure that, that we have a sense of God's timing specifically. And so, Nehemiah has come to Jerusalem. He's full of heart. He's full of prayer. He's full of faith. He's full of wisdom. He has a big vision. He has support from the king. And he finally gets to his destination, and he does nothing for these 3 days. And, I think that we see the next thing is that he gets up and he goes out by night. Based on the information given, Nehemiah set out from what would be the west side of the city. And then he turns towards the south, continuing counterclockwise around the city walls until coming back to his starting point. Now, Nehemiah didn't get up and say, well, let me go sightsee. That's not what he was doing. Instead, he is studying. What's he studying? The walls, right? The gates, and the word viewed there in verse 13 and verse 15 is it's a medical term that we see that's a term for probing around or probing a wound to see the extent of its damage. And so he sets out, and that's exactly what he's doing. He is examining these walls. He's examining the gates, and he wants to see the extent of the damage. And so this is the first time that Nehemiah is actually setting sight on what was reported to him when he was still in Persia. You remember the report that he got. And so now he is able to see it with his own 2 eyes. He's able to understand the task, or the extent rather, of the task that God has called him to, and that is to repair these walls. And I imagine, for a man who had not seen it with his own eyes, a man that was as deeply troubled as he was whenever he was getting in, after he got that message of the condition of Jerusalem, I would have a hard time believing that as Nehemiah rode around the city walls and examined it, I can't imagine that his heart was not even more heavy, and that possibly he didn't shed a tear, understanding the condition and where they were and what that was going to entail to get it back to where it needed to be, and how insecure that these broken walls meant in the lives of the people. Nehemiah knew the job of rebuilding these walls couldn't go forth until he saw exactly what the situation was. Nehemiah could have very easily focused on all that was right with Jerusalem. They're back in Judah, right? And that's a good place to be for them. The forced exile was over. The temple was built. Sacrifice and worship was conducted. Progress was being made, slow as it was. And, there was really a lot to be thankful for in Jerusalem. But sometimes, and this is where it's hard, if we get too caught up and too consumed with all that's right, but you don't ever pay attention to what's wrong, there can be problems with that, can't there? Sometimes you have to do the hard thing and look and say, hey, this is all good. This is all great. But we got to fix this. In Jerusalem, they could have done just that. But the walls of the city were just as important as the other pieces. And I get it, maybe not as important as the worship and the temple being built. But again, Nehemiah, he takes a look at what is wrong. And, we deceive ourselves if we only look at what's good. Right? I can look at we can talk about that as a church. I can talk about that in my own personal life. Right? Spiritually. I can look at everything that's good, and there's some good things there. But there's also some things that Jerry needs to work on, right? And so if I don't ever address those things and target those things and say, I need to work on that, then I'm not doing myself any justice. We as a church, listen, we have a lot of good things in this church. This is an amazing church. I believe that with all my heart. And I don't just say that because I pastor here. I'm telling you, I hear that from people outside of this congregation. But we have things we can work on, don't we? We have things we can do better, don't we? Yes, all of us do. We as a church, and so we deceive ourselves if we always only look at the good. And there's also on the flip side of that, there's some that don't have any trouble finding what's wrong. You see, you have to have a balance, because you can always focus on the negative and the things that are wrong and neglect the things that are good, and then guess what? Everything's in shambles. So you have to have that balance, and so we have to have our hearts right, hearts ready to act, and take an honest look at where we are. And that's what Nehemiah is doing as he is riding around and examining these walls, looking to see what it's going to take and what's going to have to be done to get them repaired. As much as anything, Nehemiah took time to count the cost before starting the work. He has a heart, he has faith, he has a vision. But before the vision can become a reality, he has to see exactly what has to be done and what it'll cost. In terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of effort, in terms of leadership. Verse 17 and verse 18. Then said I unto them, you see the distress that we are in? How Jerusalem lieth in waste, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. Come and let us build up the walls of Jerusalem, that we be no more a reproach Then I told them of the hand of my God, which was good upon me, and also the king's words that he had spoken unto me. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for this good work. So, again, Nehemiah, after he's examined the walls and he gets a crowd of people together, and he says unto them, do y'all not see the distress that we're in? Do you not see the condition? They were, these were folks that, when you look at the citizens and the leaders of Jerusalem, they were not sitting around waiting for a Superman to come along and rebuild their walls. And all probability, they had probably accepted that it was an impossible job. They weren't. They had just accepted that it was what it was. The walls are falling down, and it is what it is. This was a 100-year problem that they had. And, years ago when somebody tried, guess what? The enemy stepped up. The enemy stopped them. And so you know what they did? They just lived with it. Let me tell you something. That's a sad place to be. Whenever you feel like that, I have tried, and every time we start doing this, the enemy steps up. Let me just tell you something. That's how Satan works, y'all. That's how he was working right here in the city of Jerusalem to keep God's people oppressed and to keep them in a vulnerable position. And guess what? He does the same thing in our lives. When you examine the problems that you have and you try to fix them and it doesn't get fixed like that, and you give up and you throw your hands up and say, you know what? It is what it is. I'll never get that fixed. Then you've just given him a victory. Unfortunately, that's what they were doing here. And so, when Nehemiah finally comes and explains his vision for the rebuilding of the walls to the leaders of the city, there was a tremendous amount of importance attached to the meeting. Nehemiah, understand this is not a job Nehemiah could do by himself. Couldn't happen. This was, something that was going to require a lot of help and support. And listen, he would be in a lot of trouble if these leaders did not support him. He would be in a bad place. And so, no doubt, this is something that Nehemiah, I believe, prayed about a lot. I'm sure that he asked God to prepare the hearts of those leaders and make sure that they were on board to support the work that God had called him to. And I'm sure he prayed and asked God to let them see that he's not coming condemning or criticizing or just trying to make them look bad. He's just simply coming to help. We oftentimes, and I'm thankful that it was not the response for Nehemiah. But every now and then somebody will step up and somebody will want to fix something that's wrong. Something that needs to be fixed. And I look and I think back to David. When David showed up, whenever the Israelites were battling the Philistines and Goliath had been out there mocking and calling them out. And that was a problem, was it not? And so David gets there and David sees the problem. And David says, I'll take care of this. I'll fix the problem. Well, what kind of response did David get? It wasn't a good one, was it? I mean, maybe Saul was like, I'll take whatever I can get. But some of the others just kind of ridiculed David, his own brother. Questioned his motives. Listen, David was just trying to honor God and fix the problem. It would have been very easy for some of these folks to have looked at Nehemiah and said, who do you think you are? We've been here. We've tried that. That didn't work. You don't think if we could do it that we'd have already had it done? You don't think if that was something that we were able to do that we wouldn't have done it already? Doesn't that sound like some things people in today's churches would say? Who do you think you are? You think you're just God's gift to... God called him to do it though, didn't he? So maybe he is God's gift to them to lead it, right? Listen, we have to be careful not to look and think that every time somebody wants to try to help and fix something we can't take it critically. We have to be open. We have to be willing to let God work and let God use whoever it is that he leads there. And that was what I'm sure Nehemiah prayed about and wanted them to know that his only purpose was to come and help. And, Nehemiah wisely approaches the leaders of Jerusalem, and which he had to, in the accomplishment of any vision or goal, or at least a God-sized vision or goal. There's going to be people essential to accomplishing that goal. These were the people in this case, and he needed their help. If he'd got out there and tried to start doing this without their help, he would not have been successful. And so Nehemiah's wise approach gives us a great example to follow. And wisely Nehemiah asked them to notice the obvious. He says, "Do you see the distress? Do you see the distress?" And unfortunately, sometimes the obvious is the hardest to see. Right? You'd think that clearly the walls, that's not something that takes somebody with a PhD to figure out the walls are in bad shape. Wisely, Nehemiah didn't come as if he was there to fix the problem. He said, "Do you see the distress that we're in?" Again, he puts himself in the same boat as them. Nehemiah owned the problem as if though it was his also, even though it wasn't. And but Nehemiah didn't play the blame game. He didn't point fingers, and he didn't criticize the leaders of Jerusalem. He simply identified right along with them regarding the problem. Thirdly, he asked for their partnership. Come, let us build the walls of Jerusalem. Let us. Not, hey, let me. Not, hey, I'm here and I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to make sure I stand here and make sure y'all get it done. I'm going to supervise. No, Nehemiah would be right in there with them, getting his hands dirty. And, I'm sure that Nehemiah figured, hey, you know what? If God could move on the heart of a pagan king, the king of Persia, then by all means he could move upon the heart of his own people to join in. And so Nehemiah wasn't there to do it with them, but he was there to partner with them in the job of restoring Jerusalem and its people. Nehemiah also pointed them to the result. He said, listen, that we may no longer be a reproach. That we may no longer, this isn't really about bricks and mortar. It's not about having beautiful walls and beautification of the city. This is about a condition of shame, a condition of fear, a condition of poverty, and a condition of insecurity among the people. Because as long as those walls and those gates were in the condition they were in, that's exactly how they would live every day. Fear. Insecure. Why? Because they're vulnerable to the enemies outside those walls. They can come in. There's nothing from stopping them. They can attack them from all sides, however they want, and there's no defense. They just come on in. Take what they want, do what they please. And so he pointed them to the result. And, the hard work involving the brick and mortar would be worth it because it would have a real spiritual impact in both individuals and the community. Again, when David saw Goliath, he was outraged that Goliath would, cast disgrace on the people of God. And, he asked one of my favorite questions from the Bible: is there not a cause? Everybody else was sitting around doing nothing. David said, hey, there's something worth fighting for here. And that's what he wanted these people to see, is that, hey, the rebuilding of the walls is something that's important to our condition as a people. This is important for us. Wisely, Nehemiah encouraged them in the Lord. He reminded them. He let them know, hey, listen, this is... God has already been on me. God's hand has already guided me to this point. He's already guided me with the king of Persia. He makes it very clear that it is God that is orchestrating the whole thing. He's using Nehemiah as kind of the leader to push things forward and to get the job done. But God's the ultimate overseer. And so he wants them to know that. Wisely, Nehemiah gave confidence by telling of what God had already done. He told them that the king's words that he had spoken to him. And, it's one of those things that if something has God's fingerprint on it, people want to get on board with it. And he knew that. He wanted them to know why he didn't have a physical stamp that God had stamped and said, here, take this and show them. He could tell them, hey, let me just tell you what he's already done using the king of Persia and how he's already provided thus far. I look at that and to me, and I don't know how you felt, but to me, it was God's stamp of approval back 7 years ago whenever we voted to send Brother Mark to Perry. And I don't know how much of that I have told y'all. I tell the story all the time, so I can't remember who I've told and who I haven't. But whenever Brother Mark first mentioned that he was leaving St. Mary's and that he felt like God was placing him back on the mission field, it was actually at a national meeting. I had spoke with Brother Mark, and I said, well, where do you feel like you're being led? I already had a heart and a burden that I believe God had given me to plant a church somewhere in Georgia. I didn't know where. I had looked in that Macon area. That was all I knew. And so Brother Mark told me at that national meeting that he was praying about somewhere up in North Georgia. And so I went back and I looked. I was in my hotel room that night, and I did some research and was looking, and it was kind of a bit of a tourist area, and that's a hard, not that a military city is not hard, but when your communities are predominantly rental cabins and things of that nature, that's a hard place to build a church. And so just my opinion, I ain't never done it, but I can't imagine that it would be easy. And how well that would go. I never had peace about that, so I just kind of said, hey, you know what, it is what it is. God's going to take care of him if that's where God wants him to go. And a few months passed by, and it was a Georgia State meeting that was being held at Wayside, and so I met up with Brother Mark over there, and again asked him, how things were going, and he said, good. He said, just went and did a little bit of a survey of an area, and I said, well, where did you go? And he said, he said, we went to Perry. I said, well, that ain't North Georgia, Brother Mark. And he said, no. He said, I just kept praying about it and kept praying about it. And he said, God laid this on my heart. And he said, so we went there. He said, I think that's where God's going to send us. And I said, I said, well, that's a whole lot closer to the area that God laid on my heart. And I said, we need to continue talking about this. And obviously the rest is history. But I feel like that was God's stamp saying, hey, I'm going to take, and I brought y'all together. And one was here and one was here. And now I'm going to align things and put them together. And then obviously Brother Mark's heart about the mission field itself was another reassurance for me. But Nehemiah, he told them of everything the king had said how God had worked in this, orchestrated this. We can see what Nehemiah didn't do. Nehemiah didn't beg. Nehemiah didn't make deals. Nehemiah had a high calling from God and asked others to be a part of the vision. The same thing to me whenever a missionary knows where they're called and where they're being sent to, and they have that place, and they go around and they have a vision. We call it deputation. They're just trying to get other people to be on board. Trying to get other people to say, hey, you know what, we want to be a part of that. And Nehemiah never once did he stop treating it like a high calling. He was going, he wasn't going to have fun and manipulate people into to games and doing things. No, Nehemiah was going to work and complete the job that God had called him to do. Nehemiah didn't offer rewards or incentives or vacations out of the Sea of Galilee for the ones that got the job done. And, he just simply said, let's get to work. We got a job to do. This is going to help us not be vulnerable. This is going to keep us from, being insecure. And so he said, let's rise up and build. And wouldn't you know it, that the people said, yeah, let's do it. Let's get on board with you. Let's get this thing started. And, they could have, there's many responses they could have given. They could have denied that there was a need for walls. They could have said, listen, the only protection we need is the hand of God. We've gotten by without those walls for 100 years now. And, we already have the temple. And, but listen, God wanted them to do, and I believe Nehemiah saw this vision, that he wanted them to do more than just simply get along. See, that's not how God operates with his people. He doesn't want his people to just get along. I think when we have that mentality, we become complacent, do we not? Listen, I think we as a church, and not only are we a great church, I think we're in a good place. However, we can't stop. We have to keep going. We can't just say, hey, we're good. We're all right. No, we have to keep reaching people. We have to keep carrying out the mission and the job that God has called us to do. And so, listen, we can't just get complacent and satisfied. And so, thankfully, these folks, they didn't respond that way. They also didn't look at it and say, man, Nehemiah, that's a lot of work. Man, that's a lot of work, Nehemiah. They could have looked at him and said, hey, I hope it goes well for you. Good luck. God bless you. That's what Baptists say whenever they ain't got nothing else to say. God bless you. But they were willing to pay the price right alongside of him. They could have seen the opposition is too strong. They could have said, Nehemiah, listen, we agree. But do you know what we've had to deal with every time we try to start doing that? Do you know the opposition that comes in from the outside and stops us from working? And it's just going to happen again. But instead, they had more faith than that. They said, we'll start with you. We'll come alongside of you. We'll get to work with you. And they set their hands to do this good work. God had obviously been working in their hearts, and Nehemiah's heart, his prayer, his boldness, his big vision, his action, his wisdom were all rewarded. Verse number 19. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the servant the Ammonite and Geshem the Arabian heard it, they laughed us to scorn and despised us and said, what is this thing that you do? Will you rebel against the king? So things have been going real well. And so guess what? When things are going well, don't be surprised when opposition comes. Again, Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite, and Geshem, they come to oppose the work. Understand that spiritual opposition to the work God wants to accomplish is a reality. And many Christians fail to take account of and are thus defeated in what God would want them to do. Understand, when you begin to do what God has called you to do, it's not going to come without opposition, no matter what that looks like. That may be, I know of a friend of mine that whenever he surrendered to preach, one of the first things he said was that, man, my dad's not going to like this. And I thought, man, I couldn't wrap my mind around that. I wasn't really sure how. I knew my mom and, and that side of my family, I knew they'd take it well. And I knew most of the people in us, I wasn't sure how my dad would take it when I told him I felt called to preach or that I was going to be a preacher. He never had anything negative to say about it. But, there's going to be, so sometimes your opposition comes within your own family. Sometimes it comes within, it could come within the church. It may come without. Regardless, though, you have to understand that it's going to come. And when we don't prepare ourselves for that opposition, and we haven't gotten ourselves in a position to say, you know what, it's going to happen. But if this is what God has called me to do, I have to keep pressing forward. I believe Nehemiah knew opposition would come. I believe that he had prepared himself for this time. But let's look a little bit at these, Sanballat and Tobiah. These we first see these two in chapter 2, verse number 10, and they were deeply disturbed that a man had come to seek the well-being of the children of Israel. I think that right there tells us a lot about them. They had made their opinion known, and now they'll seek to do something about the progress Nehemiah is making. Tobiah is actually a Jewish name. He was a man of influence. He was associated with the high priest's family and getting help from the priests. And you can see a little more about Nehemiah chapter 13 and verse number 4. But he was a prominent name in priestly families for generations to come. And his name actually means Yahweh is good. How about that? Strange name for a man who's an opponent of the work of God. Sanballat was connected by marriage to priestly families. There's an ancient document from this period that refers to him as governor of Samaria. Now, we often look and we see these two men. We think of them as outsiders. These are Jews. They're fellow brothers of Nehemiah and the citizens of Jerusalem. You would think they would be in favor of this work, but instead they're on the opposing side. And it's one thing, and I think that's where I mentioned what I mentioned a while ago, because we anticipate opposition from the outside. But it's when it's opposition from the inside that it hurts the most, that it's the hardest to overcome. Listen, when you feel like God has laid something on your heart to do and you begin to set out to do it and you try to do it to the best of your ability, the exact way that God has led you to do so, and you get opposition from your brothers and sisters in Christ, let me just tell you something. That's a hard pill to swallow. But the reality is it happens. It happens. And that's exactly what Nehemiah is facing. And the Bible tells us they laughed us to scorn. They wanted Nehemiah to feel stupid. They wanted him to feel mocked. They wanted him to feel foolish. And, this is, there's many that are turned away from God's will because they experience or fear scorn. I remember whenever, it's probably been 20 plus years ago, when a man by the name of Marvin Jackson began a ministry called the ABA Disaster Relief Ministry. And let me tell you something, the things I heard about that were just, I couldn't believe it. However, today, they're used very frequently. Because what do? We've and this is part of the problem with Christians today, is we put God in a box. It's one of the things I love about Macedonia Mission Services. It's one of the things I love about the ABA Disaster Relief, and I could go on. There's so many more, and some that I met this week while in Springfield. But, we can't put God in a box. And these were preachers that were talking about this ministry and how useless it was and how we should be investing money in other things. And yet now, I promise you, some of them have probably called on the ABA Disaster Relief Ministry to come alongside of them just a month or two ago in Somerset, Kentucky. They were up there whenever tornadoes destroyed places in Somerset. Whenever these hurricanes last summer came through and destroyed, they had boots on the ground in every place. Listen, when it may have been Helene, I don't even remember. They went into North Florida, down in around the Madison area where that storm first came through. And listen, brother. Yeah, it's because I called him brother instead of what I normally call him. Dr. Slavin. I call him Dr. Slavin at work. And so anyway, his mother lives alone in Madison. And so I had talked to him, and he had told me that, she had some trees down and stuff, and the driveway was blocked. And so I made a phone call, and the next day they had her driveway cleared. Listen, it's stuff like that, but it's not even just those. It's not even the fact that I can call them and I know that they're going to get there if they're there. But it's the fact that, you know what else they do? When they're tearing off a roof, or they're tearing off of a tree off of somebody's house, or they're clearing their driveway so they can get in and out, you know what else they're doing? They're sharing the gospel. Listen, that's what it's all about. And so we think that ministry is preaching. It is. But we have the mentality that it's just pastoring. And yes, ministry is pastoring, but there's all kinds of ministries out there. It doesn't matter. Whatever we do should be part of our ministry. Wherever we are, go. As you go. Whenever it says, "Go ye into all the world," that is as you go, wherever you are, and share the gospel. And so, these folks are laughing, and this is ridicule from within. And I'm telling you, sometimes you'll get that. It's okay, especially if you're outside the box and you try to do things that are not with what may be a custom or tradition of the way things always have been done. But they are, so they're getting ridiculed from these guys, and they are within. So they laugh them to scorn. But then look at it. The next part of that says, "What is this thing that you do? Well, you rebel against the king." This also shows that they have a low view of God's authority, right? That, here they are, and they figure the king of Persia is the highest authority in the land. First, they're completely ignorant. because they didn't know what they spoke about. Because who gave Nehemiah permission to come? The king. The king was a partner in the work. Second, they weren't concerned about God's authority, and really it did not matter whether the king of Persia was against this work of the God of heaven and earth, or whether he was for it. It really wouldn't have mattered, would it? If God had sent Nehemiah and the king was opposed to it, guess who's going to win? God's going to win every time. And so these guys, obviously, they have a misunderstanding of the authority of Almighty God. Verse number 20, then answered I them and said unto them, the God of heaven, he will prosper us. Therefore we, his servants, will arise and build. But you have no portion, nor right, nor memorial in Jerusalem. I love the fact that Nehemiah here, that he doesn't go into detail. He doesn't say, you didn't know it, but the king told me I could come. He sent me with an escort. He doesn't even get into that with them. But how does he address them? He says, listen. He said, the God of heaven, he'll prosper me. God's got my back. Don't matter what you think. Doesn't matter who else is with me and who else is against me. God has my back. And again, he's not put on the defensive by their mocking and scornful attacks. He's straightforward with them. He's bold. And, when faced with this choice of pleasing man or pleasing God, Nehemiah knows exactly what he would do. Let him mock. Let him mock. He's going to serve the Lord. And, he didn't give a point-by-point replay. He just proclaimed his confidence in God. Nehemiah didn't put the work on hold. He didn't call up all of his buddies and say, hey, how do I respond to this? What do we need to do in light of this? And, he didn't do all that. We see a sense of boldness in Nehemiah's response. Nehemiah basically said, you can go ahead and do what you want to do. Say what you want to say. Think what you want to think. But we're going to be successful. Not because of who we are, not because we're better than you, but because God is behind this work. He tells them that they have no heritage, nor right, nor memorial in Jerusalem. They may have been Jews by birth. They may have been legal citizens of Jerusalem. They may have owned property in the city. But their hearts show that they had no heritage or right or memorial in God's city. Nehemiah sized these two up more quickly than we probably do ourselves. He knew they weren't for him. He knew they weren't for Jerusalem. He knew they weren't for God. And though they may have claimed to be, Nehemiah basically looked at him and told him, you know what, you don't belong here. You don't belong here. God's doing a great work here. And if you don't want to be a part of it, there's the door. That's pretty bold, isn't it? However, sometimes that's what has to happen. Hey, you can either be a part of what God's doing or you can move on. That's what Nehemiah was telling them. We don't have time to oppose God's work. And so Nehemiah is very, very bold. This opposition didn't immediately melt away. And, we often wish as if everything we did, if we did everything right, like Nehemiah did here, that the opposition would just go away. Nehemiah did everything right. But the opposition ain't just going away. We can't expect the same thing to happen for us. It's not going to just go away all the time. Sometimes it might. This group would oppose the work being done there all the way until it was finished. So there's no point in opposing it any longer. But they guess what? They opposed it. Let me ask you this: did they stop it? Absolutely not. And guess what? They were proven wrong. Understand, people can be opposed to you doing whatever it is God's called you to do. They can either get on board with you or they can get on down the road. But don't let them stop it. Prove them wrong. Because if God be for me, who can be against me? Greater is He that is in me than he that is in the world. Amen? Anybody have any thoughts, comments, or questions tonight?